Hi everybody, welcome to lesson 4 and 5, the effects of the Wall Street crash. I'm going to introduce these two lessons to you together today, and for homework there's going to be some questions to answer, and then on Friday I'll do a short lesson going through the answers to all of these questions together and introducing lesson 6. Looking at page 30 in your textbook, the general effects of the Wall Street crash. Now the effects of the crash were felt hard and felt by the whole of America and actually the world. In Germany, unemployment rose as Americans were no longer able to lend them money. Now, after World War I, when Germany had a large debt to pay because they were being punished for starting World War I, they had no money to rebuild their country. And so they started to borrow money from America. But in 1929, when America had the Wall Street crash, they had no extra money. So they could not continue to lend money to Germany. So as they stopped lending money to Germany, and Germany had to pay back that money to America, unemployment began to rise. But this lesson is going to focus on the United States. Many rich Americans had invested a lot of money in shares and lost it all. Remember speculation from the previous lessons. People had borrowed money to invest in the stock market. Maybe they would have 10% of the money and they would borrow 90% of the money. So because they had a large debt, when the shares began to lose their value and they sold, they were selling for a loss. So when they sold for a loss, they still had debt to pay back to the bank or to the organization that they borrowed the money from. Companies also lost heavily and had to dismiss part or all of their workers. There was overproduction. They were making too much stuff. There was nobody to buy what they were making. In the Wall Street crash, people lost their money. They didn't want to buy radios. They didn't want to buy cars. So the factories had to reduce their workforce because they were making less things. During the period of the Depression, from 1929 to 1933, more than 100,000 businesses closed completely. They went bust. They had no more money. They had debt. They could not continue to stay open. So that's all those workers at the 100,000 businesses lost their jobs. Many businessmen who had lost everything committed suicide instead of facing the ignominy of living in poverty. Ignominy means the shame. They were so anare. Now imagine you are a rich businessman and you borrowed money to put in the stock market and you lost all of the money that you put into the stock market. Imagine having to go home and tell your wife, babe, I lost all our money. We will have to leave our house. The bank is going to take our house and our car. We will have to live in the street. We will have to become beggar. Well, for many businessmen, this shame was too much for them. So instead of going home and telling their wives what had happened, they ran up to the window in their office building and jumped out. The offices might be 20, 30, or 40 floors in the sky. And they just jumped out the windows, and a few seconds later, they were dead, leaving their families in poverty with no money, and maybe leaving their families with no home, as the banks would still take what belonged to them. Banks also suffered in the crash. Many banks had invested in the shares and they lost money. Remember, on the 24th of October, the bank spent $250 million investing in the stock market. We looked at that in lesson 2. $250 million investing in the stock market to try and build confidence. But their plan failed. People still had no confidence in the stock market. And as the price of the shares went down, the banks lost their money. Also, customers lost confidence in the banks and they tried to withdraw their money. This caused a run on the banks. Now, a run on the banks means many people try to take out their money at the same time. A bank makes money. Many people save their money in the bank, and the bank uses some of that money to lend to other people. They always assume that people will not ask for all of their money back at the same time. So they lend a large amount of the money to businesses and individuals. But because they were losing money in the stock market, and because people lost confidence in the bank, and many people were trying to get their money out of the bank at the same time, the banks didn't have enough money to give to everybody. And so they were in danger of going bust, of collapsing, of closing because they could not repay people what they had saved. In 1929, in just 1 year, in 1929, nearly 700 banks collapsed. In an attempt to try and stay open, the banks had to begin to recall some of their loans from companies and ordinary people. So because the bank needed money, they had to ask people to pay back their debt more quickly. But the problem was that the companies that had borrowed the money and the people that had borrowed the money no longer had it. And so they could not repay their debt to the bank. And as more companies collapsed because they could not pay their debt to the bank, also more banks collapsed because they could not give the money back to the people that saved money in the bank. Now that's the long version. The short version, the summary for your exercise books, is this section here at the side. The effects of the Wall Street crash were felt around the world. People that had borrowed money to buy shares lost and had large debts to repay. Many factories closed, and so people also lost their jobs. Some people committed suicide instead of going home. Others lost their homes, and whole families had to go and live in the streets. There was a run on the banks as people tried to withdraw their money, meaning that several banks ran out of money and also closed. This caused more people to lose their homes. Pause the video now and write down the summary. Okay, lesson 5 on page 31. Here are 5 stories, 5 reports from different people. Let's read them together. The first one. The factory I work for shut down last week. They say there are no more orders and no one will buy their goods. It's true. No one I know has any money. Some of my friends are living on the streets. Others have to queue every day for bread at the local Salvo Army soup kitchen. Salvo Army is a Christian organization, and a soup kitchen is a place that gives food for free. I need to sell my shares, but no one will buy them. They're worthless. But that doesn't stop the bank demanding that I repay the original amount. I told them I can't, but they just don't listen. So this is from a factory worker in 1930. The factory that he worked for closed down, so he lost his job because nobody wanted to buy anything. Some of his friends were living in the streets, they lost their home. Some of them had no money for food and they had to get charity. The factory worker had bought shares and he wanted to sell them because the price went down but nobody would buy. He also has a debt to the bank. Let's look at the next one. This is from a New York banker's diary. I want to die. I've lost everything. My home, my job, my savings. I don't know what I'm going to do or how I'm going to tell my wife. One of my friends committed suicide this morning. I know how he must have felt. This banker said he'd lost everything. He had no job, no house, nothing. All his money had gone. And he had to tell his wife. He understands why his friend, another banker, had killed himself. The next one is from a socialite. A socialite means a rich lady who never had a job but liked to party. The days used to be such fun. Endless shopping trips for the new fashions with the girls, lunchtime drinks and evening parties. Now I have nothing. No one will buy my photographs. No one has any money. That means no parties, no more money, not even enough for a packet of cigarettes. My banker said that my shares are worthless and the bank wants everything back. Here is another one who had bought shares and she had a debt to the bank. Before, she used to have fun every day. She used to go shopping with her girlfriends. They used to go for parties and drinking. And now nobody has money, not even for cigarettes. The only job she had was taking photographs, but photographs are luxury items. Only people that are rich, that have lots of money, will buy. And when the economy is going down, nobody will waste their money on photographs. Now, the American journalists. In the state of Washington, I was told that forest fires were started by farmers trying to earn a few dollars as firemen. In the state of Oregon, I saw rotting apples and sheep farmers feeding mutton to buzzards. So this is a journalist writing about what he's seen, and he's writing about a different place. He's writing about the agriculture region. He said, some places there are farmers setting fire to the forest because if there's a fire, the government will pay the farmer to put out the fire. So the farmers are being very naughty. They start the fire themselves and then they go and put out the fire so that the government will give them a salary. In Oregon, he sees the apples rotting in the field because nobody can spend money for the salary for the worker to pick them. Also, nobody has money to buy them. And the sheep farmers are feeding mutton to the buzzards. Mutton is sheep meat. It's old lamb. And buzzards are big birds. So the farmers are feeding their meat to the birds because nobody has money to buy. Now you might think that's a waste, but think about it. If a farmer wants to kill the sheep, he has to hire the workers and pay them money. He has to give money to the factory where they kill the sheep. He has to give money for the transportation. If nobody has money, nobody will buy. So if the farmer spends money killing the animal, they will lose that money if nobody can buy. So it's cheaper for the farmer just to let the meat stay in the field and be eaten by the birds. And the last one is from a factory owner. I'm going to close the factory for a while. We are not making any money at the moment. We still have some money in the bank and we have the building, but if I don't close, I'll risk my own house. I feel sorry for the workers, but what can I do? Now here is somebody that's not quite as bad as the others. This factory owner still has some money in the bank and he still owns the land where the factory is built. But if he stays open, he has to pay the salary of the workers. If he pays the salary of the workers, he will lose money, and then the bank might take his house or his factory to pay the debt. So he's going to close the factory. He feels bad about the workers, but he says, what could he do? He has no choice. Now, just by reading through these 5 examples of what life was like for individuals, you will see that almost everybody, whether they were rich or poor before, whether they were in banking or factory worker or farmers, everybody was losing during the Great Depression. Many people had debts to the bank. Many people were worried about where they would live. Many people worried. We'll answer some questions on this and then we'll talk about it a little bit more on Friday. So homework number 1 is from lesson 4 on page 30. I want you to answer those 3 questions, and I would like you to answer the question at the bottom, what does this picture show? Try to write 3 or 4 sentences to describe the photograph. This is a real photograph from 1929. This shows you what life was like for one person. Try to write down what you can see. And then homework number 2 from page 31. I'd like to answer question 1, 2, and 3. All of this needs to be completed before Friday. O sulla sai, Kode.